partner at SAP Solicitors. Then we have Anisa. She's been working for SAP Solicitor for a while, for a long time now. So we are solicitors of England and Wales. So I'm going to keep this very simple. Sorry, 1 second, apologies. That's the bad thing about working from home. Thank you. Sorry. So, I really appreciate the initiative of the Meem Foundation, particularly for having such sessions in where, the young generation, they can have, counseling in relation to choosing their next, career. Because I think this is very important for young people that they have an insight of, literally every field, every area of profession they can choose for. I mean, one of the other point I'd like to say that whatever you want to do, as a young person, my preference and advice and suggestion would always be that go with something which gives you a title, whether that's a doctor, a pharmacist, or architect, or barrister, or solicitor. It will go, a long way when you basically step into your professional or your practical life, should we say. So legal career, you can have a legal career, in a number of ways. So mainly, I'm going to share my screen. Again, it's very, very boring kind of page, but it will give you some information. So can you see my screen, Vikram?
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah, we can see. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So to start a legal career, I'll leave that bit to Ikram. He'll cover the academic side, and then Anisa will also cover another side of qualifying as a solicitor or a legal professional. But just high level here, guys. You can qualify as a solicitor. You can qualify as a barrister. You can even qualify, as a judge, for example, and you can work in the judiciary. There are a number of positions in judiciary one can achieve, starting from, for example, judge, a tribunal judge, or a district judge, or a circuit judge, and then eventually, make your way, to high court, and then obviously court of appeal or supreme court. Then we'll, in this particular session, we'll cover the solicitor route, should we say, and you will have, we'll try to give you an in-depth taste of, how to become a solicitor. Barristers and solicitor, they're like part and parcel. The difference between the two, the obvious difference between the two is that solicitors basically, they're like behind the scenes. They work on the files, they meet the clients, they take instructions, they prepare the cases, they plan it. So basically, they're like based in the office and they're meeting the clients, and they effectively do all the work on the file. Barristers are predominantly, representing clients in the courts. They basically don't have direct access to clients unless they are direct access barristers who basically can take instructions from clients directly. So in other words, if I put it this way, that barrister will work on the instructions of the solicitor, this will not be incorrect. Then if you've got a legal qualification, you can find yourself, some good roles and position, big organizations like, the United Nations, the EU, the African Union, and many other organizations. It doesn't necessarily have to be a charity. So you will have corporate or corporations and big companies, where you can find yourself good roles with obviously good future aspects. We can talk about, let's say, the type of or the areas in legal field. So there are, I mean, not tens, but literally in hundreds. But the predominantly, the one we know would be, let's say, corporate law or commercial law or litigation, immigration, family, employment, personal injury, property conveyancing. But then you've got other areas of law which may be of your interest and which may be a bit more lucrative in terms of money. For example, IP like intellectual property or taxation, or fraud, for example, criminal for that matter, sports law, IT law, European law. So you can then basically, after qualification, or while you are going through this qualification, you can decide, which area of law is of interest to you, and then basically you can specialize in it, and then you can pursue that path as a career. So this is just a bit of brief about legal career and what scope and prospects you may have. Teaching is obviously there, as you can see, like law school professors, for instance, you can even have the legal qualification, and then you can pursue a career in teaching as well. So that's the professional side of it. But in addition to that, if you studied law, it helps you on a personal level as well. I mean, it helps you and it improves your personality. It improves you, as a person. I mean, it gives you an understanding of your own rights. Okay, so you may want to become, a civil rights champion tomorrow. You can play an effective role in the community, not just for yourself, but for the community as a whole. Whether you're representing a particular community or you know members of a larger group, for example. So it's not just about, or it's not just a profession. It's basically something which will shape and make you as a person useful, not just to yourself, but to your families and to the community in general. So I think that's from my side. I'll now pass on the mic to Ikram, so he can quickly run how to become a solicitor. But I'm managing his slide information again. Sorry guys, it's just black and white information there for you. Yeah, Ikram, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you, Bilal, for the introduction. Thank you, Dr. Saab, for of course inviting us here to be able to do this presentation. Now, what I sort of want to lead on from what Bilal sort of discussed, the options and everything being there, the sort of slide I've tried to prepare, as Bilal has highlighted, is always appears a bit boring. And it doesn't do justice to the profession, because the one thing I can tell you is that as a solicitor, regardless of whichever area of law you go into, if that's the area that you have a passion for, your job's never boring. And that's one of the good things about it. And I think one of the key things is even before we look at what we want to get is becoming a solicitor, is the key part that we need to identify that is the profession for me. Now, at a very young and early age, sometimes people don't know that. They come into even a sort of a law degree, and then they decide that the profession isn't for me. I think that's a very difficult, or sometimes a too early a judgment to make. And one of my advice to somebody who wants to qualify as a solicitor, first of all, which actually isn't on my slide, is to have a look at the Solicitor's Code of Conduct. That, I think, is a very important piece of advice I felt that I never had initially when I started sort of coming towards this career. And once I actually got further down, it's the first time when I heard about the Solicitor's Code of Conduct, because I think that in itself gives you a lot of sort of, think about what it means to be a solicitor, what it means to be representing people, or what the profession really is about. And I think that's where you then identify yourself as an individual, to say, this is either me or this is not me. So I would say that that is one of the starting points to sort of look at. And if anybody sort of missed that, and do make a note of it, it's actually not on my slide, but it is the Solicitor's Code of Conduct. And you can access that from the Solicitors Regulation Authority, their website. So my advice would be to have a look at that first of all. And as I said, that would be a good starting point for pupils. That would be a good starting point for parents to sort of look at and then know more about what it sort of means to be a solicitor. So the key thing now I sort of want to run through is essentially qualifying as a solicitor. And there's always been your conventional routes, and there are some now not so conventional routes, but are becoming very much the norm, because I think what's happening with time is that with practicality, with people's lifestyle changes, different options are sort of becoming involved, and they've sort of been there. So I'll sort of start off with the conventional route that pretty much is there, and starts off with, I think, once sort of people that have done their A levels or equivalent and are now looking to sort of go into university. So the sort of two options that you've got are, of course, looking at doing the law degree. So that would be the LLB. Now, that's your initial sort of touch into education about law. Now, I appreciate that some people may have done law at A levels as well, but this is the real sort of step into understanding what the law is about, and different areas of law that are essentially there. So you've got your conventional route of either going through the LLB, and that can be, as I understand, a 3-year course, or if you're, of course, looking to do that part-time, I believe that runs into the 4th year, and you can complete your exams and your courses through there. Or, of course, what you also have the option of, and I often give the example of one of my good friends. Now, and he's a very successful commercial lawyer. I won't mention his name, and I won't mention where he of course, works at the moment. What he decided to do, and I was already into law at the time, and I sort of knew him from my sort of cricketing days. And he went to sort of university and sort of did a qualification in languages. And he sort of studied Spanish, French, and then I think there was a 3rd language that he had his focus on. And after graduating and then getting his experience there, he then came on and then did what was the sort of, and I think what you'll see on the slide is the law conversion course, which is the Graduate Diploma in Law, GDL. So you've got two options to start off with. Either you think I'm going to go down the conventional route of doing the law degree, or essentially, if you feel like you want to do your bachelor's in a different discipline, you've always got the option then to come back and do the graduate diploma course of the GDL. And once you've sort of done the both or done one, if you only obviously did the qualifying degree, currently the process that's there at the moment is you are then required, if you want to, of course, become a solicitor and not a barrister, is to do the legal practice course. The legal practice course, essentially, again, you have two options, whether you want to do it part-time or you can do that full-time. Now, the legal practice course in itself is what we call a real step up from the law degree, because essentially in the law degree or in the GDL, what you are learning is the principles of law and of course, where the law comes from. So there's a lot of theoretical side of things. The legal practice course in itself was designed to sort of that step up and cover that area between before you go into into the work profession, to sort of prepare you for what actually happens in practice. So very much designed around certain areas of law, for example, and then the key areas that are, of course, the core modules that you have to do are, of course, litigation side, so where you've got your civil litigation, you've got your criminal litigation, that sort of covers under that. You've got your business law and practice, which sort of covers the very basic elements of course, business law and how that works. And then, of course, solicitors' accounts, solicitors' code of conduct, And then sort of these sort of key areas that are of course taught in there. I'm not going into mentioning into every single subject that's there. Of course, like we've got property law and other things that are, of course, your cause as well. But what that sort of gives you an idea of is when you're studying that in when you're at university, it's a very much a client-based environment that you have. So you are expected to sort of maintain files and in particular scenarios that you would face, and what you are required then to do in practice. So what we did, and then at a very basic level, when of course I did my LPC, and then I don't think it's been mentioned, I was also lecturing on the LPC at the MMU as well. So I designed the course, and then of course other courses that are designed by tutors are very much to get you into practice, to prepare you for going into practice and giving you that practical experience where a client comes in and you are faced with a certain scenario, and you then sort of have to advise that client. So where you practice then your interviewing skills, your advocacy skills, and then key things. So that is, of course, and then the legal practice course. Now, once you've done your legal practice course, there is then that expectation, of course, to find work. And then hopefully that goes well. And the aim for every solicitor or aspiring sort of a lawyer is to get what was the training contract. And there is a big race for what was known as the training contract for many years. There's a lot of pressure for people to try and secure that. It's very much, and then it's a sad thing to say that it's often very hard to sort of get it. And then you don't understand why it's so hard to get it until you actually get into the profession, or perhaps even you qualify as a solicitor. So once I qualified as a solicitor and the responsibility came on me, I then understood why that first part of the training or getting that training contract was the important thing. So the training contract essentially itself is something obviously that you're offered by a regulated solicitor's practice or a solicitor's firm. And in that, what you essentially are sort of doing is you're required to do a minimum of 3 seats. What we mean by 3 seats is 3 different areas of law. And it depends on, of course, which sort of sort of practice that you're looking to go into. So if you are, and then sort of, I'm going to step back into and link in the legal practice course, because one of the key things to sort of identify is which area of law do you really want to go into when you are doing your legal practice course. Because your training contracts as such, when you're applying, or firms that you're applying to for your training contracts, what they should be looking at is not just what, whether you got a 2-1, whether you got a first or a 2-2 or whatever, result that you got in your LLB, or whatever you got in your sort of in your legal practice course. The most important part is choosing the subjects and choosing them wisely. Because if you're looking to go into corporate practice, then there is very little point in choosing, sort of something down the lines of criminal, or choosing something down the line of immigration or family. Because what you've got to sort of target on is to show the firms that you're applying to that you've planned your career, and then that's what you're essentially looking at, and then choosing your subjects very wisely when you're, of course, you're down that route. And that's where you then start applying to firms for training contracts. And then when you go into that as an employer, one of the key things I would be certainly looking at, and I know Bilal looks at, is, well, if you're looking to come into our firm, you've applied at this particular firm, is that something that you've sort of, covered in your legal practice course? Are those the areas? Because otherwise, why would you be applying to a particular firm if those aren't the areas that you've sort of done in your legal practice course? It's not to say that you've done those and you can't change, but when you then come for an interview, it's very important for you to be able to then communicate and say why the change. So one important piece of advice or recommendation, what I can say is then choose your subjects carefully, and then once you come into the firm, make sure you do your research. And then you do your sort of 3 seats, as I said, as a minimum. Some firms can do 4. Now, you may be offered training contracts by firms that actually don't practice 3 areas of law, or don't specialize in 3 areas of law where they don't feel that they can give you the adequate training. You may be, sent on a secondment to another firm for a period of 6 months to be able to complete one of your seats. Once you've sort of done your training contract, and as part of that, in your training contract, you do what's known as the professional skills course. And once you've you completed that professional skills course as well, you apply to the Solicitors Regulation Authority, where they sort of look at, ensuring that you've had the required training, your training principal has signed the key documents, and of course, you are somebody who is of good character. Now, that brings me back to something that I sort of started off with. Importantly, qualifying as a solicitor, and I said, look at the Solicitor's Code of Conduct, because even whilst you're there as a trainee solicitor, you've got to remember that's a very important aspect of it, and that's something that they're looking at finally again, that do you sort of match that code of conduct? Are you a person who is of suitable character to be having this profession? Now, the profession is very much all about, one of the key things that's drilled into you from your day one right up to the end are, of course, things like, client care, providing your client, a good service. But what's often important to remember is the bit that's providing your client good service is acting with integrity. That is the most important part that you're looking at as aspect of practice as a solicitor, or even qualifying as a solicitor. That are you sort of acting with integrity? And that's the key part. And once, of course, the SRA are sort of, happy with your application, you essentially then qualify as a solicitor. You're required, of course, then to get a practicing certificate, apply for that, and then that's issued to you essentially as a solicitor. Now, what's happening at the moment is the sort of big changes are sort of expected to come in by sort of 2021. I believe that is the aim date. Although with a pandemic and a couple of other things, there may be sort of changes that it might be delayed at the moment. I'm hearing some news that it might be delayed. But essentially, the key part now, of course, is having done that, is the new process that's now coming through. Now, the key parts of the new process, essentially, the first part is very much the same. So your undergraduate degree, or the equivalent, as I said, where if you've done a level 6 or a bachelor's degree in a different sort of a discipline, you do your conversion course. Once you've done that, now the changes that they're sort of bringing in they are taking away the legal practice course. And what education providers are essentially now sort of coming through is the SQE essentially that they are looking at and that route, and that's sort of been split into essentially two separate areas. Now, what you're required there is that you have 2 stages of exams. So rather than having all your core subjects, I believe that's another a aspiring lawyer that's coming through soon. That noise? Hello?
Yeah. Let's continue, please.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry for the disturbance.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah. So what I was essentially saying is then it splits into sort of 2 stages, where you will have your SQE sort of level 1 and SQE level 2. So that's being split up into sort of 2 stages, with of course the SRA sort of splitting that into it. And the idea behind that is that you will be expected to sort of have a qualifying work experience with a law firm for a period of course 2 years. And with that, you're also required then to do these 2 exams instead of passing all your modules, as I discussed in the legal practice course. Now, the good thing, what seems to be coming through from this, and from a personal view, what I like about this is that I think it's taking away the conventional route very much through saying, look, study the areas of law, do the legal practice course, and then come into sort of, into practice. What is essentially now saying to you is what's required is work experience, because in reality, and something I sort of wanted to share earlier as well, is that because there are so many people who are sort of looking to get into the profession, one of the things as employers, what we're looking at is does somebody have that work experience anyway? Because the key thing is that you may have a first in your LOB, you may also have a distinction or whatever higher mark in your legal practice course, but employers often now prefer somebody who's had experience of coming into it. So this is why I quite like the SQE program that's been proposed, because essentially what they're looking at is to get people into sort of work experience practice, and count that towards it rather than have a training contract. Because historically what's happened is people have worked at firms for many years and they struggle to get a training contract, and they feel like that they put a lot into the profession and haven't got something back from it. The good thing about this is now is that your sort of experience that you're doing with a firm, it has to be recognized. So of course the firm will essentially have to come in through and deal with it, but it doesn't have to be, of course, with one firm. I believe that it's being sort of confirmed that you can have work experience with sort of up to 4 firms of that 2-year period. And in that 2-year period as well, what you are then sort of required to do is to do your exams. And that is, as I said, the SQE level 1 exam, which mainly sort of looks at your legal knowledge aspects of things. So it is very much based on legal knowledge. What it will involve is sort of, the proposal is multiple choice questions, and you can't sort of progress to your SQE stage 2 until, of course, you've done SQE stage 1. And then SQE stage 2 mainly involves very much practical issues. So what we were talking about, what the LPC sort of presents, it hasn't been made very clear how they're essentially going to be assessing it, but I believe it's very much going to be a scenario where you have sort of your practical skills, what you've acquired, so your interviewing skills, your sort of assessment skills of the case, you being able to interpret, of course, what your client needs are, and then very much so. And then that's sort of, partly coming through. And once you've sort of done that, you then apply to the SRA. You show to them that, of course, you've had the relevant qualifying experience with the firm. So the firm or the firms that you've essentially worked with, they would, provide the confirmation, of course, the experience and then the documents that are required to go with that. And essentially, then that you have done your SQE level, 1, and of course your SQE level 2, you make the application to the SRA, and effectively what they would do is they would carry out their checks, and then once those are done, you qualify as a solicitor. So that in a sort of a nutshell is your sort of a route. Now there is one other route, and I'm going to leave that for my colleague Anissa, who's going to be sharing the SILEX, which is the Chartered Institute of Legal and Executive sort of studies, and then Anissa will be discussing a bit towards that with you in detail.
Hi, sorry there, my connection just seemed to go a bit slow. I'm going to just share my experience of how I qualified. I did go into the profession quite naively, thinking that once I've completed my law degree, that would be it. I'd be rolling around in money and I'd be, a high top lawyer. Obviously, time and experience has proven to me that that's not the way it works, and that's not happened. So I completed my LLB. I was then told by a lot of people not to go in to do my LPC, being told that, you can't get training contracts easily, and it's a lot of money to spend before being guaranteed that you are actually going to eventually become a solicitor. Luckily, I was pushed into it by some family members. So did my LPC, again, came out of the LPC quite naively, thinking that's it, training contract will be in the bag. Started looking and applying for training contracts. It was then I think I had a taste of reality, and I realised that it's not going to happen. I had no experience, nothing to share with anybody. So I started to volunteer at law firms and try to build up my experience. I still continued to keep trying for training contracts, but unfortunately, it was one of those where I was told that I would have to wait and keep working. Then I was told by somebody about the SILEX route, where I could register as a graduate member. It was a small amount of money to spend to register with them. And once I had done that, I could then continue to work as a caseworker. However, I was on a route to qualifying. For me, that worked out really, really well. I was able to leave the firm I was working at, join SAB Solicitors, but still continue with on my path to qualifying. The only, I think, downside was having to complete a portfolio at the end of the 3 years to show how I'd met certain learning objectives. Possibly a more organised person would have done it as they went along, but I left it until the last minute and had to sit there with hundreds and hundreds of pieces of paper trying to work out how to complete this portfolio. Managed to complete that, sent it off to Silex and qualified as a chartered legal executive. But for me, that was still not the end. I still wanted to become a solicitor, even though chartered legal executive is the same. It's just the word solicitor that I wanted and the title of solicitor. So I completed my legal practice course and then converted through the SRA as a solicitor. I think this profession, to join this profession, you need to be ready to put in the hard work, put in the time, put in the effort, but then the rewards are immense. You're learning every day. My advice would be only come into this career if you're willing to listen, willing to learn, and willing to develop every day. I think that's everything from me.
Well, thank you, Anisa. Your presentation isn't that boring. Actually, I've looked at it, it's very nice. And I'm going to leave this, LPC versus Silex slide for a bit there. So you guys can have a taste and compare the two, and you're free to take screenshots or, pictures of this. Yeah. And then I'm going to move on to, there are a couple of more slides. I want to share that with you guys. So this slide is very useful. I find it very useful. It gives you literally to the point, in terms of costing and the timing and how you would achieve. It's basically what Anisa has done is she's gone through the non-conventional route. She was working with us for a number of years while she was still enrolled on the Silex, and then eventually when she's completed and taken whatever final exams were, she qualified as a solicitor. So you can easily see the comparison there, in terms of the time it will take if you want to take the conventional path or the non-conventional. Eventually you'll get to the same destination. So I call it, if you want to take the Virgin train or if you want to take the Megabus, it's up to you guys. Both, have pros and cons. And thank you, Akram, there for such a deep, insight. So this slide will talk about advantages to qualifying as solicitor through the Silex. And the next one would be, I guess, disadvantages, Anisa. Oh no. Oh yeah, it is. Okay. So they're not that bad, As Anisa has said, she was working full time, and the time she was working, that was considered towards the qualification or qualifying as a solicitor. So just very high level, although I'm not a trained barrister, but the basic qualification is literally the same, LLB, and then you basically choose between LPC, which is the legal practice course, or the BTP, which is the bar training. It used to be BVC bar vocational course, but now they've changed into bar training practice or something like this. So that's another, obviously, route or career to consider. So if that's, I think, everything from us. If anyone has any questions, so please fire away.
Rafiq bhai, can you check if there is any questions on the messages?
Yeah, I have been checking. There have been no messages in the chat box.
All right. Okay. Okay, if nobody is asking question, there is one question they've sent through the email is that there's one newly qualified lawyer and and wants to take the career as a barrister. So what's need to be done, or how you can reach to this ladder of becoming a barrister?
So is it a solicitor want to become a barrister or a barrister or the other way
No,
around?
no, as a solicitor is just recently qualified from the university and now looking forward to pursue as a barrister. So finding difficulty in how to approach this.
You know, the most or frequently asked question is the other way around. So there are a lot of barristers, who want to qualify as a solicitor because as a barrister, they're, I don't know, should I say job prospects or, future prospects aren't that bright, because one of the difficulty with barristers is that they cannot seek instruction from clients. So they cannot just, open up a chamber and sit down and say, oh, or maybe even, to find a job, because mostly barristers, basically, they are self-employed, they their career is different in terms of the scope which a solicitor will have. So anyways, going back to this particular question, because the question is related to how to qualify as a barrister, I wouldn't be, we wouldn't be in a position to answer, because that's a barrister or somebody who's regulated by the Bar Council would be in a position to answer. But if it's the other way around, so just for general knowledge or information, so if somebody is qualified as a barrister, there is a conversion test qualifying. It's called QLTS, Qualifying Lawyers Transfer Test. In fact, that test is for even people who are basically registered lawyers or qualified lawyers in other jurisdiction, like in foreign countries. They have this opportunity to transfer, their registration and qualification into the UK. So that's through QLTS. It's the same, like the doctors when they come from foreign with foreign qualification, they do the PLAB and all the rest of it, and then they go on the GMC. So yes, solicitors or SRA has a similar program for foreign qualified, including the barristers if they want to become solicitors. Unless Ikram, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much the right thing. I mean, the one thing I possibly will say is two things to sort of consider at this particular point, because even as a solicitor, you can get higher rights of course, audience. So that's something worth looking at, even as a solicitor in this particular time. And one of the things I will say is, of course, as Bilal's already highlighted, look, it's I think not necessarily probably a question for us to answer, but of course, for sort of barristers. But what I would do is have a look at, try and see on LinkedIn, there are a lot of people that are barristers that are there. Speak to them. They'd be able to guide you. If somebody's asking that question, if they want to sort of add me, I'm quite happy to sort of direct them towards a barrister if, of course, they want some help with that. But the other thing to keep in mind at the moment is, and look, Bilal will say this. I mean, I never put sort of think about a profession, but with a pandemic at the moment as well. Of course, do what you think is the right thing to do at the moment. But with court hearings not taking place, and of course in a very different manner at the moment, the level of work for barristers is quite low at the moment. It's affecting a lot of people. But if you are looking to sort of convert, make sure that you do your good research and then speak to some barristers about it. But as a solicitor, what I would say is look into, if that's what you're sort of going into, high rights of audience as a solicitor places you very much in that position to then represent clients in high courts and at a high level.
Okay, we have, I think, Rafiq, can you see there are a few questions now?
Yes, one person has asked, his question is, due to some family commitments, he is unable to study LLB law degree at a university. And he has been informed that an option to complete LLB degree via Open University. And is there any advantages or disadvantages while doing the degree via Open University compared to a regular degree at a university? Is there any difference is the question.
Ikram, you can answer that. You're on the academic side.
Yeah, I think, look, is there an advantage or a disadvantage? I wouldn't say. The idea of course, the Open University is to sort of, have that more opportunity for people who can't directly access the university. So if you're saying for family reasons, or there may be other reasons why you can't do it. It's sort of very much, it's an additional sort of an option that's been provided to sort of look into that. I mean, the only sort of disadvantage I'd probably say that I can possibly think of, but it again depends on individuals, is that not the sort of level of direct access and the regularity that you would normally have in doing that. But it sort of depends on an individual. And I think with open universities, it's sort of, whilst it gives you the relaxation and then to be able to do it in a different sort of a time scale and an environment, it's very much then places the onus on the individual to make sure that they put in the extra effort. We have one of our colleagues who's currently doing that, and you know, she's managing work, open university, managing children, you know, and with a pandemic, of course. So it's and I don't see any disadvantage to her. It's very much if it suits your needs, it's not on that. One of the things, what I will also recommend is rather than again the open university, just to sort of look at that, do have a look at the Silex route, because the Silex route isn't necessarily just if you qualify or complete your legal practice to do it. It is again an option to sort of qualify as a chartered legal executive, and they have a very sort of a different style of teaching and examination. So have a look at the Silex route as well, other than just the LLB on the Open University.
One thing I'd like to add is this, that you know, when it comes to practicality, employers would always look at your knowledge and skills and how effective you are as a caseworker or as an employee. So you can have a degree from Open University or MMU. It doesn't really matter as long as you know what you're talking about. You are good at what you can do. So Open University isn't necessarily a thank you, a bad thing. No, not at all.
Okay, one more question. The question says, can you only start acquiring qualifying work experience for the SQE when it comes into force next year, or can you start building it up now? Also, what requirements does the work experience need to be valid for the SQE? Does it need to be a specific role?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again?
Yes, I can rephrase that. Can you only start acquiring qualifying work experience for the SQE when it comes into force next year, or can one start building the experience now? And does the next experience need to have the work experience for it to be valid for SQE? Does it have to be in one specific role? Is the question here.
Okay, yeah. So I'll sort of answer that in two. As I said at the start, I mean, there may still be a bit of uncertainty where the SQE exams or exactly whether that comes into it in place or not. Now, the key part is and what's being put forward at the moment is that you would normally be expected to have successfully completed your SQE stage 1 before actually starting your main period for the qualifying work experience. So essentially, I think if that's the guidance that's coming out at the moment, so any work experience that you do right now may not go towards the 2 years of that. So it's unlikely that it will be sort of accepted, because I think what's mainly being put forward is that you have completed the SQE level stage 1, and then your sort of qualification starts. Because the reason with that is, as I mentioned earlier, the SQE sort of stage 1 is very much about the knowledge of law in the area. So it is something that's going to be starting sort of next year as the planned date is. So at the moment that wouldn't count. Now, in terms of the other question that was linked with it, so there isn't a specific requirement, as I said. So what you've got to sort of have is it can be work experience and then work that you've done through a sort of a qualifying sort of a recognized and regulated practice. Now that can be your work experience that you have done, which is paid, or it can also include pro bono work that you've actually done with a firm. but it has to be with a regulated practice, and what you will be essentially required to show that the period of work that you did with the practice, with a firm, essentially was supervised.
Thank you.
Yes, there's one more question from a user. He or she is asking, will it be more favorable if he takes up a degree that will qualify him to practice both in Scotland and England? Yeah, I think the context of the question is, will it be advantageous to take up a degree that will qualify him to practice in both Scotland and England?
So the degree is only just the qualification. When it comes to choosing between, where to practice, this is different. So the degree would be the same, but then if you want to practice in Scotland, then you will have to register, with the regulatory body of solicitors in Scotland, which is different. For example, in England and Wales, it's the same, regulatory body, which is the Solicitors, Regulation Authority, SRA. So degree is irrelevant here. It doesn't matter where you completed your degree from. What matters, the jurisdiction you want to practice in. You will have to make an application to the regulator there. The problem is that a solicitor of England and Wales cannot practice or appear before courts in Scotland and vice versa.
Okay.
Yeah, there is one question that I missed out in the beginning. One user has asked, will it be advantageous for him to take up some work experience in the first year of degree?
Yeah, so
Yeah. The question was, will it be more advantageous for him or she to take up some work experience in the first year of degree?
look, work experience, whether you take it in your first year, second year, third year, is always going to be an absolutely invaluable. There's no substitute for it, because the key thing, what it's showing to an employer, and that's one of the things I said, I think something that Bilal and I, or even Anissa, would essentially look at if we're looking to take somebody on, is, do you understand the practical side of it? So any work experience that you get is an additional bonus. And of course, if you do get it in your first year, what's important is to make sure that you keep following it up, because experience that you may have got in your first year and then you haven't continued that experience in your second year, third year, and then so on, may again sort of, if you come to school, of course, an employer having sort of, completed your sort of studies, your graduation, and the employer will look at your CV, and if they note that you did your experience in the first year, but then there's been a gap of 2 years, that of course then there are questions arising out of that. And then so what I would say is, experience at any time is completely invaluable, but at the same time, you can't add value to it. So as much experience as you can get is an absolute bonus.
Well, if you are asking a particular question in relation to the work experience, would that be counted towards the training contract? The answer may be different, because when you go and apply for registration as a solicitor on the roll, it's just the ultimate authority is the SRA, who will basically consider whether the time you have spent during your qualification, the LLB degree or the LPC, to consider that towards your training contract. But having said that, definitely there are provisions that they will consider some of the work you have done before you qualified as a solicitor towards the training contract. So yes, and a lot of people will do that, and then they will seek exemption from the 2 years requirement of the training contract based on the work they have taken in the solicitor's firm.
Yeah, there's one more question from a user. He says he is a recent LLB graduate and with very less work experience. So his question is, would it be wise to gain some experience in some firm before spending money on LPC, or how valuable is it? Is his question. That is, does he wants some experience first before he proceeds to do LLM. I think that's
So first of all, I'd like to tell him, sorry, Kram, I'm taking lead here. First of all, I'd like to tell him that you are not alone. Okay, a lot of people are or have been in this position. Anisa is a good example there. So definitely, you can take a break, you can take a gap year, you can go and work in a solicitor's firm. As Ikram has said in detail, it will obviously give you an understanding of what a solicitor life is about, what area of law is of your interest. So that work experience or that work in a law firm will give you a lot of knowledge, should I say, and you would be able to make decisions, for future. So yes, definitely, it's worth it.
And
You may even decide to go on the Silex route, to be honest.
If I may also add, I mean, and some of the things to sort of look at, and I think Anisa did a very good slide, sort of with a price sort of comparison of the LPC and a price comparison of course the the LPC and Silex. What I would say is have a look at the price comparison for the SQE route, because I believe that's going to be in the region of £3,000 to £5,000. So it's going to be very much sort of cost effective as well to sort of qualify under the SQE route. And I think if you are able to get work experience in the current climate with a firm, rather than going to LPC at the moment, and I don't think any LPC providers will be happy for me to sort of be suggesting this. But look, as a solicitor, my advice would be the time at the moment is definitely to get a step ahead, get your work experience in, bank that in, because what you might find is if you are with a firm, and I was quite fortunate to sort of benefit from that, and Isa's been sort of fortunate to benefit from that, and Bilal's had benefit in his career and of course working with firms, is that when I actually did my route, I hadn't even done my GDL. So I actually had a more of a sports background, and I was then considering sort of opening up a sort of immigration practice. But I ended up working and getting some work experience with a firm, and they then already sort of promised me my training contracts even before I'd even done the GDL. So it's very much advantageous. So there is absolutely, look, no doubts about it. If you can get work experience with a firm, go for it.
Excellent.
Are there any further questions? Nothing in the chat box. If someone has any fresh questions, they can type it in the chat box, please.
I mean, either we have done a good job by explaining everything, or either we have done such a bad job that young people have decided that this is not for us. Guys, don't make your decision and base it on today's presentation. Obviously, time has been an issue. So if you've got any questions, feel free. You can Google our names and you will find us easily. Our email addresses are there, or you can channel it through Meem and Dr. Saab, and we'll be happy to answer. If need be, we can even get you in touch with some barristers or other areas of legal practices which are of your interest, just to kind of give you an understanding. And one more thing I'd like to say, that we take pride in this, that we literally have throughout the year apprentices and young people undertaking work experiences in our firm literally throughout the year. From MMU, Manchester Uni, BPP, University of Law, Trafford College, Stratford High School, Loreto, Altrincham Grammar. So yes, if anyone has the desire, please feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to give them this opportunity as well.
There is another question. What is the best route to take to become a barrister after you completed the degree?
So that would be the same, so instead of doing the LPC, you will be basically doing the bar professional training course, the BTP, bar. So yeah, and then, after completing that part of the education, you will then have to look for a pupillage, for 2 years, which basically, same as the training contract, but that's, you're shadowing a barrister, day in, day out, and they have to basically give you that pupillage. And once you've done that pupillage, then you apply, on the register, on the roll to enroll as a barrister. So process is literally the same. The time, it will take is literally the same. The cost may differ, and the future prospect may definitely be different. So it's again a personal choice.
Another question: how hard is it to gain experience from a big law firm into to get into experience in big law firms? I think.
So Ikram.
Yeah. Look. I wouldn't say it's a case of being hard. One of the things that historically what you find with big law firms is they have a criteria. Now, what they have are summer vocational schemes, and then tend to sort of start early. So the people that are on their sort of doing their undergrad course, so the LLB whilst they're on that course, they sort of try to register with those schemes. So summer vocational schemes, and there are work experience schemes that they have. Now, they sort of tend to advertise that quite a lot, and the opportunities are very much available. But then it's of course, they have, they'll have hundreds and hundreds, or if not thousands of applications, of course, with students. So it's a case of then making sure that you prepare yourself for that, because then your CV's got to stand out, first of all, to sort of done that. Your educational background and everything sort of got to stand out if you're meeting the criteria. And what you'll even find then is that they then have a sort of a process, an interviewing process or process they go through that. So make sure you sort of research the firm, research the area, and go into that. And the rest is, look, there is hard work involved, but there is a lot of sort of luck involved in it as well. Don't be put off if of course, look, you get knocked back. There isn't anybody in this panel today that hasn't been knocked back. I can assure you. There have been knockbacks, and I've got colleagues and people that I did the legal practice course with who have very recently qualified, and of course I've qualified for a number of years. But a lot of people are now sort of qualifying, even the ones that were studying with me. So don't be put off by it. It's a case of being persistent. But look, big law firms do give opportunities, and they give opportunities at a bigger scale.
The other question is, can you give advice for A-level students? I think what it meant is that what is the A-level student should do to get into law, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, look, so if that's something that you're looking at, so again, I think it goes down to one of the things that I said at the starting off thing. Look at if this profession is for you, then of course consider your different options. Make sure you have a look at the conventional LLB route, and make sure that you have a look at the Silex route, and also look at if you want to sort of do another degree, as I said, that can add something to it. One of the big trends at the moment, and as I said, if you're looking to sort of work for multinational firms, is something with languages, because what you then offer, and then you do your conversion course later on, is that, with multinational sort of firms, you provide them a service where you can go and work abroad with them. So I think whilst you're, at the stage where you're at A levels, it's a good time at the moment, because you've now got different options. Consider those options and outline your path that way, I'd say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Rafiq bhai, is there any other questions? I couldn't see any more here.
There are no more questions. Maybe we are time. We're reaching the end of time.
Yeah, so if there are no questions, so I think probably we will finish this webinar. I'm very grateful for Bilal Babar, Ikram Malik, and Inisa Jas, who have done the brilliant presentation, and I think everybody liked it, and it was very interactive that we have a lot of questions regarding this career in law. And I think quite a few things I've learned as well. So obviously, certainly for the parents, it is a good information for their children to guide them. And that is what the whole purpose of doing this career guidance webinars is, to inform the people that there are the choices available, so they don't feel themselves stuck in one particular area. And if they want to pursue in law or any other really career, so at least they have opportunity to have some information directly reaching to them. So I'm grateful for the panel and also Rafiq Bhai for maintaining this IT side of it. And we will finish this meeting. Thank you everyone who joined us today in our webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.